Good morning, Stampers. I'm Pat Fairless with Fairless Stampin' Flair, and today I'm here with Learning with Friends. And the technique I'm going to share today is called Wax Paper Resist. It's been around for a while. Most videos that you see out there will tell you to use glossy cardstock, which we no longer sell here at Stampin' Up, but you can use photo paper, and a couple of them cardstock. So I'm going to show you all three, and hopefully you can have one of those and give this a try. So let's just flip my camera over and we will get started. All right, so the most common way to do this is with an embossing folder, and you emboss your piece of wax paper, and I'm just using regular old wax paper, nothing fancy, just plain wax paper. I've cut it into some pieces, and we just are going to make our sandwich with the wax paper in our embossing folder. And I'm going to demonstrate the So Swirly embossing folder. Maybe it's easier to see on here. This is not a 3D folder. This is a regular embossing folder. So for our sandwich, we're just going to use base plate number 1, and then we have 2 plates number 3, one on top of the folder and one below, and we will run it through. This folder, I tried many different folders, and this one I was probably the most happy with how it turned out, although I liked some of the others, and I'm going to definitely show you those. Get this out of the way. And I know I've heard from some of you that you don't have a Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine or an embossing machine or embossing folders yet. You are relatively new to stamping, and so don't have a lot of those more pricey supplies. So I'm also going to show you how to do this without using any of those. And I'll be honest, I think that might be my favorite card of all. So we now have our wax paper embossed. It looks kind of crinkly and messy, but that's okay. The first card I'm going to show you, I am going to use, so we take this now for the technique, we take this and we sandwich it between 2 pieces of cardstock. And typically we would use 2 of the same, but in order to show you in as little time as possible, both glossy cardstock and regular cardstock, I'm going to make my sandwich with 1 of each, and that I played with it that way, and that works fine. So we're just going to, this is the basic white cardstock, and I'm going to take some glossy cardstock. I can get that separated here. This is glossy, you can see the gloss, and we want the glossy part above touching the wax paper. So we will make our sandwich with this, and now we need to bring in an iron. And some of my friends would tell you I love to iron. I'm not sure they're correct in that. I don't mind ironing, but I have this little thing here to protect this is a tabletop ironing board cover. And I'm going to try to, hopefully it'll stay on here and you can see that okay. So we are going to make our sandwich with this. Once we get this positioned, try not to move it around because I'll show you what happens if you do move it around. I also found that laying either a paper towel or a regular piece of copy paper on the bottom and the top. So I'm going to lay copy paper on the bottom and paper towel on the top. You definitely want to have something on the top where your iron is going to touch it. But what I found is if I put some paper, actually I can show you either way. If you have paper, let's just do it this way. Let's put the paper on top. If you use paper as opposed to a paper towel, you will start to see when the wax paper has melted. So now we've got that on there, and I'm going to take my iron. I just have a really inexpensive iron here. It is not a craft iron, but you want to make sure you don't have any steam and you have it set on your cotton highest setting. So we're just going to put this on here. The copy paper kind of helps to protect your cardstock, particularly if you are using photocopy paper. It makes a big difference because otherwise your photocopy paper is a little bit sensitive to heat. But I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to stop for just a minute. It doesn't take long, and I'm not sure you can see it, but if in person where the wax paper extends, you can see that that design is starting to show a little bit. So I usually just use this on here for maybe 10 or 15 seconds. Doesn't take long. So I'm gonna assume that's good. And I'm gonna put that iron way far away. So number one, I don't knock it over, and number two, I don't hit my arm on it and burn myself. That's my normal trick. And then we're gonna separate these. And can't use the wax paper again. Now, here's the glossy cardstock. And you can see on this glossy cardstock, you can see the pattern a bit. On the basic white cardstock, you need to look at the side that was down. You can't really see it, but I assure you it's there. So let me get my little ironing board pad out of the way here. And we are going to put ink on these, and you'll see how they look different. So let me grab a piece of scrap paper. You can use whatever you like to put your ink on here. I found I like to use my brayer the best. You can also use direct to paper. Just take your ink pad. If you don't have a brayer, just take your ink pad and drag it over it. You could also use a sponge dauber or Stampin' Sponges if you have some of those. Blending brushes, but I'll be honest, it takes a fair amount of ink. So if you're using, other than dragging your ink pad direct to paper or a brayer, it's going to take quite a few coats of it to have it show up. So let's just work with the glossy first. And I'm using Coastal Cabana here. I will show you the card. On my card, I used both the glossy and the regular cardstock because it actually looks quite a bit different. And that's what's kind of interesting with this. Now with glossy, you can, with all of them, just rub it and go in all directions. And the more ink you put on, the darker it'll get, but it also does make a difference if you're using glossy cardstock, photo paper, or regular basic white. I would say the glossy cardstock is probably the easiest to get a most consistent look. And it looks like up here, I probably could have ironed just a little bit longer up on this corner. We don't see a lot of the pattern, but that's okay. That makes it kind of interesting, right? When it's a little bit different. Now I like to take either a tissue or a piece of paper towel and just kind of wipe this off to pick up the excess. Yeah, I could have left this under the iron probably just a little bit longer. I lost count of how long I was there, and I didn't want to overdo it when I was chatting away. So, but you get the idea. Here's what the glossy looks like, okay? It's somewhat subtle. So now let's go ahead and put this on the basic white. And I hope I have the right side up because I'll be honest, you cannot tell the difference. So it's a good thing to keep track of. which side was against your wax paper after you do it. And this might not have been that side. Let's try this side. What happens when you, yeah, here we can see our pattern. And this one's going to take you a little bit longer to apply ink. It's also not going to probably have as distinct of a pattern, although the pattern is clearly visible. And it's going to be a little darker in color, of course, depending on how much ink you put on. So I like to make sure it's consistent, so I tend to go in all directions. And you can see it's getting darker. Now, like I said, if you really want it to get even darker than with a brayer, just take your ink pad and drag it across it. You'll have to work a little bit harder to get it so you don't see the streaks from your pad. But again, maybe you like that look where it's a little more irregular and not consistent. So, okay, let's call that good. I'm going to wipe it off, although you can see about how much came off on the clear one. Let's start with this, or on the glossy. Let's start with this, and this will definitely pick up less ink, I think, because it's just regular basic white cardstock. So the basic white, it absorbs the ink more. So you don't, if I show you these two side by side, you can see how different they look. But I like them both. And sometimes we don't have the specialty papers, and that's why I wanted to show you that you can do this with regular basic white cardstock, and it turns out really pretty. So let me show you that card that I made. I used the Spotlight on Nature stamp set, and here's my card. And you can see that this was the one on the glossy paper where it's got a much more distinct pattern, and it doesn't get as dark, so it doesn't absorb the ink as much. And here's the one that was on basic white. So there's enough difference on those, I think, that it makes it kind of pretty when you combine the two. So you can do, because with every technique attempt you do, you are going to get two sheets because you've got one on the bottom and one on the top. And they are obviously, one is the negative and one is the positive. But if you wanted to just do the same on both, that's fine too. So there's my first card. For the inside, I had lots of leftovers on this one because I did both. So I had 4 sheets of paper, so I put a couple strips on here. And I actually used another one of the regular basic white cardstock to put on my envelope. So that's the first card I wanted to show you. And that uses the most common way to do wax paper resist with an embossing folder. Now I'm going to show you how to do it if you don't have embossing folders or a die cutting, stamp and cut and emboss machine, or something similar. If you don't have that yet and you're just starting out, you can still do this technique. So I get my brayer clean, and I'm going to flip this over. We put it over here on a clean side. And I have to bring my iron thing back in, but before I do that, this is the way we're going to do that. Again, I'm going to take a piece of wax paper, and this one I'm going to show you on photo paper, just so that you can see all three. So I don't have an embossing folder. I don't have a die cutting machine. Just take your piece of wax paper and crinkle it up. Okay, make it into a nice little crinkle, and then smooth it out. And use this now as your embossed piece of wax paper, and you will be amazed how cute this turns out. And like I said, this is probably my favorite card I'm going to show you today. And I do have 2 more I'm going to show you. So let's go ahead and do this. I will bring in back my pad here, my ironing surface, so I don't damage my tabletop. And I am going to use photo paper, if I can find my photo paper. Here it is. And I'm just going to use 2 sheets of photo paper this time. And this is just some old photo paper I've had that I never used. So I'm using it for card making. And we're just going to, again, make our sandwich. So lay this here with the glossy side up so that your wax paper is always against the glossy side. And on the top, you want your glossy side down. And smooth it out just a bit. And once again, I'm going to take a piece of, well, let's use the paper towel this time. We can use paper towel. The paper towel you cannot see as well if your wax has started to melt. I do think it protects the cardstock a little bit more from heat, so that's why I like to use it on the photo paper. The photo paper, if you overheat it, it does have a tendency to bubble a bit. It can. So let me see if I can pay better attention to how long I have this on here. I should have myself a little timer, right? I usually counted slow to 10. So let's just kind of do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I give it just a little bit extra because I've got paper towel as opposed to regular paper. So maybe it's 20 seconds by the time all is said and done. But let's give this a shot and see how this turned out. Hopefully my iron stayed on and didn't go to sleep. And again, I can see this on here. I am sure you probably cannot. But let's go ahead and put some ink on here. And these are actually going to look the same. They're just the opposite sides of the wax paper. So I grab my piece of paper here. And I am going to ink this one with pecan pie. And we're just going to do one side of it because they're going to look exactly the same. So you don't need to watch me do it twice. I have cleaned my brayer. Make sure you clean your brayer between applications. And let's just rub this on here. Now this one I actually did make it quite dark because the darker I made it, the more I saw it. And the photo paper does not spread around as evenly as glossy cardstock, but it does absorb the ink color much more. So you can see where this is dark here in the center, and just keep adding ink until it's exactly like you want it to be. But you can start to see what that crinkled wax paper looked like. It just sort of made this really interesting all over pattern that I thought turned out really kind of interesting. And I think what I liked even more was that if it didn't look exactly like the embossing folder, which some of them did not, and I will show you some other samples besides the cards, where they just didn't really look like the embossing folder. And I'm like, huh. Well, with this one, you don't have to worry about that, right? Now, I could show you, let's just take the direct ink to paper here and let's just drag this on here if I want to get this darker. You can do that as well as brayering. It will And I think my pad's a little bit on the dry side, so you might want a nice freshly inked pad. But again, this piece is so much bigger than what I needed for the cards. So I didn't worry if I got all the way to the edge too much, but you can certainly just take your time and continue to get it inked. And I think maybe you can see here, let me pick this up. The wax paper wasn't as big as my cardstock, so there is no pattern out here so that you can see the difference between that. Okay. And if you want it lighter or you want it more inconsistent, then don't continue until it's consistent. So that is the technique without an embossing folder or a machine. And I'm sure however you crinkle this, it's going to look different. But let me show you the card that I made with that. This one I used Fluffy's Friends, and Fluffy's Friends is a cute little stamp set. This is an online exclusive. Last time I checked, it was still available. But here's the card I made. It's got a cute little bunny and a bird, and this is their background that they're sitting on. Aren't they cute? I love those little guys. On the inside, I just put a little strip of designer paper. Obviously, I could have used a strip of this because if I inked, I have 2 sheets, and this is much larger than the die cut that I used. I think this one also is a little bit darker than the one we did. I probably had a little bit, I inked it a little bit longer, but you get the idea. You know how it's done. So that is card number 2. And before I show you card number 3, I'm going to show you some experiments that I did not make cards out of. So this was one, I used this cute crochet embossing folder. I like this embossing folder. I just got it, and I was really looking forward to using it because I thought it was really cute, kind of a nice all over pattern. I thought it would look really, really pretty if I could see these squares. But when I put it on and I used photo paper here, it really, this is one side is the negative, one side is the positive, and you really can't see the pattern at all. It did not show up like I was hoping it would. It's just kind of speckled, right? And I thought the crinkled wax paper actually was more interesting than just these speckles. So I ended up not making a card out of this. This was bubble bath ink for reference. So then I decided, well, maybe embossing folders that have a lot of fine detail that are very subtle all over don't show up as well. So let's try this one. This is the Eyelet 3D embossing folder. And this one, I was semi-happy with it. But remember how I said if you move your wax paper as you're ironing, this is what happens. You can see it slid. And so I got wax paper. I got wax from the paper in kind of places I didn't want it. It didn't move on the bottom. This would be the negative side or the bottom of your folder. And this is the top where you see more detail. So I tried it again. This was Highland Heather. I tried it again with another color. Oh, I actually did it a third time. This was also photocopy paper, and I just made it darker and darker. And you can see the pattern a little bit better on this one, that it looks a little more like you can see it a little bit better. Certainly better than the one where it slid, right? So that was my experiment with that embossing folder. And I also tried it with Moody Mauve. This was Moody Mauve. I think it turned out better with this color. I was also experimenting with different colors. Do I need bright colors, pale colors? So I wanted to try all kinds, medium colors. This one actually looks a lot like the embossing folder. This is the negative side. This is the back side. I'm not sure. It's a different look. But I didn't make cards out of those. So the last one I made with this embossing folder called Dashing Designs. I know how well you can see that. This is quickly becoming one of my favorites, mainly because it is quite consistent. And it's not super deep, even though it is 3D. And here I used the wildflower designs. I got some new, an order came last week, so I got some new stuff to play with and I wanted to play. Here was one side of my sample. And I used Azure Afternoon here, and here's my card. So I just use it as a background. And again, here I had some strips left over, so put that on the inside. And for the folder or the envelope, I just stamped a little flower. So those are my 3 cards. I think the most interesting experiment was probably the wax paper. Just because I know some of you don't have all these tools, and now you can still do the technique without it. You can see it still makes really cute things. Play with how much you crinkle it. Maybe you fold it in different patterns. So those are the 3 cards. The other interesting experiment was the one I kind of did with you today, where we did glossy cardstock. This one actually is photo paper. This is what we did today with the So Swirly. And here we had glossy cardstock. This one has regular basic white cardstock. And here's the same one done on photo paper. So you can really see the difference in what they look like on these three samples. Okay, so I thought that was nice to show you, if you use different things, how different they're going to look. Again, the photo paper really absorbs color, so it's deeper, darker. And these were all Coastal Cabana. You wouldn't know it. This almost looks like Shy Shamrock, doesn't it? But all 3 of these are Coastal Cabana, so you can see how different they look and how you can create different looks by using different kinds of paper. So that wraps up today's video. Let me flip my camera back and we will wrap this up. Thank you for joining today. I'm so glad you're here. If you're new, welcome. I'd love to have you subscribe to my channel. Also, if you would like more ideas, please visit my Fearless Stampin' Flair blog. And if you like, I do have a newsletter that I send every other week. I don't send it every week. But in there, I also give lots more tips and tricks and some inspiration cards. And of course, keep you up to date on what's going on at Stampin' Up, what the specials are and so on. And this month, we have a great special, 10% off on all die and die bundles, I would call it. It's a stamp set and a die. The stamp set with the punches are not on special, but the die bundles are an additional 10% off. You always get 10% off on a bundle, but you get an additional 10% this month in June. And they're also having 10% off on all of the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machines. So that's a great deal. But if you'd like to keep up to date on that stuff too, there is a link on my YouTube channel where you can sign up for my newsletter. Or if you're watching this on Facebook, there's a link also there where you can sign up for my newsletter. And I'd love to have you do that too. And maybe we get to know each other and become even better friends. So thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your week. And we will see you next week with something else. Have a good one. Bye-bye.